Thank you for that little short video clips. And next I'm going to introduce our speaker for the evening, and that is Patrick and Nurre. Patrick and Vicky live close to Yakima over the pass there, and they just came over this evening, had dinner with us, and now we're here. He's going to give us his talk. And the talk that he's going to give is something we've never heard speak on before. Patrick is a geologist by training, so the talk title is Gems and Crystals in the Light of the Genesis Flood. Many people can't answer the question, how do we explain how we got gems and agates and crystals? How does that work? We know how rocks form, but some of these special gems are very different. Patrick is the founder of Northwest Treasures. He's written 17 geology books, and he leads a number of field trips, which you'll learn about as we get into it, and fossil digs, and he does a lot of speaking at homeschool conventions. So very well versed, been doing this ministry for a long time. Patrick, come on up.
Well, good evening. Just a little bit about myself. My wife and I became believers back in the Jesus movement days, so we're part of that crazy crew of people that came up. And I had, of course, been trained in secular geology. I was in my senior year of college, and somebody handed me Henry Morris's book, The Genesis Flood. And it just shook my world when I read it, because I had studied geology, but no one ever talked to me about other views and how other ways to interpret the geology around us. And from that point on, I became a real strict Bible-believing creationist Bible thumper. So that's I've been at it ever since. So usually, I get invited to speak at these things right on my anniversary, January 24th. And so for the past umpteen years or so, I'm not sure how many it is. But this year, they put it a week later. So we hit our anniversary for the first time without anything going on in many, many years. But so here we are. Anyway, this is an interesting topic. I really feel like in my working with homeschool families, homeschools around the world. I have several students in New Zealand, and a lot of my stuff goes over there. But there's one challenge to the homeschooling family and, of course, private Christian education, and that is this, that we read the Bible, we teach that it's important to know it. Very few people, very few Christians really know the book of Genesis. It's kind of an alarming thing, really. And a lot of us as Christians even regard it as maybe we're not supposed to take it literally. And the one breakdown is that Christians, by and large, do not know how to take what we read in the Bible and apply it to the geology of the earth. It's a practice that secularists do all the time. They have their framework. It's not biblical, but they have their framework, and they use that as their framework to interpret everything they see. And Bible believers should be able to do that with just the basic things we have in the Scripture. And so tonight, that's what I want to kind of give attention to, is how the Genesis flood might have affected these beautiful things that we seem to appreciate but can't quite wrap our brains around it. So with that, we have a lot of resources we use to help train families and kids. That's my primary focus, is reaching those kids. Very, very critical. We're going to go through some horrendous times in history in our country, and it's going to hit our kids and grandkids the hardest. And what's most on my mind is that we equip them how to think and how to challenge what they get challenged with, and how to help people see Christ. And that's not going to happen in Sunday school. It just won't, because we're primarily concentrating on doctrine. But the real big questions that trip up people's faith, even adults, is Genesis, the book of Genesis. And the latest big battle is Noah being, of course, a myth, and the beginning of modern history. And geologists and paleontologists, archaeologists put it way, way back, 6,000 years, even beginning 6,000 years before creation. Well, that's just absurd. And so what we want to do is learn how to take what we see in Genesis and use it as a framework to interpret all those pieces of evidence we're finding. There's a lot of evidence. We just don't know how to use it and how to interpret it. So we're going to be concentrating on that. And some of the resources that we have, in March, well, 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, we moved from Bothell. We'd been there 22 years. And we moved out to the Yakima area. We had a thing called the Geology Learning Center set up in 2 or 3 places in Bothell. We couldn't stay there long because people who owned the building wanted to do something different. So we packed it up, and boy, after the last time of doing that, I thought, I can't do that again. Either God's going to have to give us the building, or I've just got to put this ministry aside here. So here a few years ago, we did move, and we found a place. Actually, my wife we were on our way back from Phoenix from a homeschool convention, and she found this. It must have been posted that day, and there it was. Everything that we needed. There were 16 things I had on my list of prayers. What do we want to see in a place? And all of them were in this place. And so we did. Here is the Geology Learning Center, at least parts of it. We have all kinds of displays set up there. Since March, we've had over 600 people visit it. So it's becoming a kind of a go-to place. There are about 500,000 people that live in that Yakima Valley, and primarily an agricultural area, but there are a lot of families that are just hungry for this kind of thing. And so this is what we do here, take our time. We also have different things going on through the year. We've got some brochures out there. It's called, this is our family camp we put on every year up in the Okanagan country. And this year is be Volcanoes and Voices, Geology and People of the Pacific Northwest. And so that'll be our theme for the 5 days that we're there, or 4 days. We give a tour to Yellowstone. We've been doing that for about 17 years now. Family field trip, helping people to learn how to interpret what they see through biblical passages, and as well as the Geology Learning Center. And then we have online courses you can take or have your kids take. We're there to help any way we can, so if you're parents and you're interested, I'll direct you to the right people. My wife, Vicki, back there, does all my editing. In fact, by the time I get through writing a book, I'm sick of it. So I just say, look, I don't want to see this again until it's all done and ready to print. So you do the editing, and she comes back with a couple of pages. You need to change this, do this differently. And so we go through that process. And finally, we come out with a finished product. But yes, we have a lot of books out there, primarily, again, written for the youngsters and their parents, and how to equip in earth history and earth science, the right way to do it. So tonight, we're going to begin with gems and crystals. And here's the big question. What does the Genesis flood have to do with gems and crystals? Well, let's start, first of all, by trying to answer the question, what is a gemstone? Well, there is no international grading system or definition for a gemstone. The value of a gemstone is driven by primarily 3 things. 1, its rarity. 2, its demand. Whatever people are willing to pay for it is really its value. And 3, in the eye of the beholder. So you may think you've got a valuable gemstone, other people, they're not impressed. But that's why. There's just no international grading system of gemstones. There's an example of one you guys are probably familiar with. It's the Ellensburg blue agate. Now, this is a gemstone, and it's an agate. So keep that in mind, because agates are, most agates, a dime a dozen. But this one is very special. It's the 5th rarest gemstone in the world. And so to get a little piece of about a 1/4 inch rough piece is about $140. So that'll tell you what we're looking at here. Now to get one polished or tumbled, of course, is going to be significantly more expensive. I bought a whole bunch of scraps from a person years and years ago, and I use them in my kits on Washington geology. And they're just little, tiny little scrap. And those cost me $10 an ounce. So I didn't get a whole lot for that, but I got what I needed. So Ellensburg blue agate. Now another example of a gemstone is the agate. And it's actually translucent quartz with lots of color and banding variations. That's what makes an agate. You tell the difference between an agate and a jasper, which is the bottom picture. Is you take an agate, it's the same mineral, quartz, just got a lot of different coloring in it. But if you're wondering whether you've got an agate or a piece of jasper, put it up to the light, and if you can see through the edges of it primarily, you've got an agate. If it's all opaque, you've got jasper, but the same mineral involved. Both of these are considered gemstones, even though jasper is very, very common. The unique looking jasper is what's really going to drive up the cost in a gemstone, the beautiful colors. Well, how about the diamond? Everybody wants a diamond. You know, the news tells us diamond's a woman's, best friend. And I hate it around Christmas. They always drive it into you. If you're any kind of a man, you'll spend $3,000 to get this diamond for your wife. And I said, wait a minute. You got to know what I know, okay? So the market for the diamond is actually artificially created by De Beers in 1888. And they recognized a hot deal that would, investment for the future. So they bought up all of the diamond mines. Up until then, diamonds were, not really part of the royal diadems in different kingdoms. Diamond was used to cut things. It's very, very hard. It's the hardest mineral. And it was used to cut things, even in Old Testament times, to cut it. But no one really was enamored by its value. It's actually kind of plain, except what gives the diamond its value is the facets. Those are those little things that reflect light on it, all those little angles in it. But the De Beers did give it a market and an international standard grading system. And it's the only mineral really that's done that way. And of course, advertising, and that formed the market. So if I just remember that, I'm not so much under the pressure at Christmas. I'll get her something else. She'll probably like a ruby better. And actually, it was the ruby was one of the main gemstones in the before 1800s. So although the diamond was used in Old Testament times, I have yet to find the word, the Hebrew word for diamond in the Old Testament, so you might be able to point that out. The word that's used most often in the Old Testament is the word corundum. And it's a very hard mineral. It's 9 on the Mohs scale, so it's right next to the diamond. And you'll see a picture of it down there. It's a 6-sided crystal. When you find it in a crystal form, beautiful red color, and makes a valuable gemstone. Stone of hardness, and even in the Old Testament, was used as a stone of beauty and of jewelry. And it's in, I believe that it's in the high priest's breastplate stones, ruby. It's actually a variety of sapphire. That's what it is. Sapphires can be green and blue. And when it's red, it's called a ruby, same hardness, but it's a beautiful, beautiful stone. Now, here's something amazing about the diamond. Not many people think about this. The diamond responds in fluorescent light. It glows, and it glows this color. This is one of the ways women, guys, shut your ears, would you? Would you plug your ears for a minute? See, you're not listening to me. Okay, so women, if you want to find out if you've got a genuine diamond, show it under an ultraviolet light. And if it glows like this, you got a nice diamond there. But the question is why? Why does it do that? And we're going to explore that tonight. The opal is another interesting gemstone. The picture you're looking at here is called precious opal. There's a difference now in the different grades of opal. This one is extremely rare, and it's extremely expensive. The other kind of opal can occur in a number of different kinds of colors, and it's called common opal. And it's really not expensive at all. And there's lots of varieties, though. I love to collect it. But precious opal can run anywhere from $10 to $20,000 a carat. So if you find it with the flashes of light in it, that's what makes it valuable and extremely sought after. These are a list of the precious opals. See the little flashes of light in them. That's what gives them their rarity and their demand. Now, here's the mystery. Opal is quartz. You see the chemical formula there, SiO2, so silicon and oxygen. But it's very, very soft. Quartz normally is a very hard mineral. But opal is soft, about a 5 on the Mohs scale. And in fact, it's so soft, if you get it too hot, it just shatters and blows all over the place. I've ruined more opal in polishing it by getting it too hot, and it heats up very fast. And then all of a sudden, it just starts spitting the opal all over the place. But it happens because it's very soft. But quartz is very hard, a 7, just a few steps away from the diamond. So it is really an altered form of quartz. Now, the question is, how did it get altered? What made it softer than regular quartz? It's the same chemical formula, so no different. Now, there are thunder eggs, and this is a little bit of a clue to me, what we're looking at here. I've got some thunder eggs back there on display. Thunder eggs are volcanic. They're found in volcanic outcrops all over the world. Oregon's a great place. In fact, it's the state rock of Oregon. But I've worked a lot with thunder eggs just like this one. That's an opal center. And it's blue opal. It's common opal, but isn't it pretty? I mean, it's just these are the opal ones that I've ruined. When I sand, I use an upright sander, and sanding opal it can alter it in a hurry to something completely different. So you have to be careful when you're working with it. But it is volcanic. Now, the same type of thunder egg, same area, you can also find them. The centers are pretty blue, but they're pure quartz. And you can tell the difference. When you sand these, you've really got to work them. That's how much harder the center is. But those are volcanic nodules. How are they formed? Why is one soft and one is hard? And did God create them? When did they originate? So these are all questions that they're good brain teasers. And takes a lot of research and just reading a lot of things, but most of all, understanding some passages in the Old Testament. And I think it helps us, and we'll get to those. So what is a crystal? Well, a crystal is from the Greek word meaning ice. And it's, bear with me here, it's a little heady. It's the molecular arrangement of a specific set of elements. So get that now. This is a special arrangement that gives crystals their shape. And they have to be arranged in just the right way. So for instance, we take the quartz crystal. This is SiO2, silicon dioxide. And again, very, very hard crystal. But when quartz appears as a crystal, it's always six-sided. Always. Doesn't matter. It's always six-sided. Now you can find what we call massive quartz, which is, some call it cryptocrystalline, where you can't see it with the naked eye. It's just, a white or a clear stone. But the shape of its crystal is its habit. And its habit is always six-sided. Why is that? What's with that? Was that something that was created, or was it something that was produced by the power of the Genesis flood? Well, we'll look at that. The crystal habit has a specific arrangement of electrons. Now, you're going to have to reach back in the years here and kind of look through your file and get out the file on 3rd or 4th grade science when you studied the atom. But you'll notice that you can have a variety of quartz crystals in color. But notice they're all six-sided. The colors are due to other elements, and geologists call those impurities. Well, yeah, I mean, you could say that they don't belong in the original structure of the quartz. So they're additions, and other elements like iron will give you the smoky quartz, and you can get cobalt gets mixed in there, gives you a pretty purple. Smoky quartz, again, iron, and a few others that are out there. But it's six-sided, and that's one of the ways you identify it as quartz. It's all still quartz. The specific molecular arrangement has to do with atomic configuration. So those of you who are kind of, oh man, I don't think I can think back that far. We'll get, now some of you will identify with this. We'll get on the Wayback Machine of... you remember this, don't you? Go on, some of you remember this. It was my favorite part of the whole Bullwinkle classic series, I learned more about science and history from that program than just about anything. So the word atom was given to us by the Greeks. It means without cutting. And the Greeks didn't know what they were looking at, but they thought that there was a point for matter that you could not go, you could cut it, but you couldn't go any smaller than a certain point. And they called it the atom, but they didn't really know what it was. They didn't know what it might look like. They just knew that they suspected that it powered everything, and to some degree they were right. You know why the Greeks felt that way? Well, if you go back to your book of Genesis, you'll find that the Greeks came from one of the sons of Noah. You remember which one it was? Well, it was Japheth, who gave birth to Javan, who then, in the mission that God had given Noah and his sons and his grandsons, was to populate the earth and fill it. Well, Greeks came along some point later. And a lot of the things that we learn about God from Genesis followed that mission down. Some of the relatives and descendants of Noah did a lot better job at maintaining them. Some of them were mixed with different kind of myths and so on, and a lot of times you can see it. I've got 2 books on my shelf on Adam and Cain, or Athena and Cain. That's the name of it, Athena and Cain. And there's Athena and the serpent. And you can see that the serpent was also something that was passed down. It was remembered quite well by the descendants of Adam. And the great statue of Athena used to sit in a museum. It's been lost, but by description, we do have it and have recreated it. But it's a big statue of Athena with her army helmet on and her spear in one hand, and the shield, army shield, is down, military shield is down next to her feet. At the front of that shield and down at the base is the serpent. And so you can see now they've mixed in some things on concerning the human creation, the fall, and the serpent giving the wisdom. The Greeks were known for their wisdom, and they credited the serpent as giving that to them. Well, this is, of course, our job, isn't it? As believers, we have a very similar mission in life. It is to, of course, spread the gospel, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, and then teaching them all that I've commanded you. So it's a very similar mission to what Noah had. And this is a part of our duty with our kids and our grandkids, is to help preserve the truth, not water it down, not change it, not substitute it, but to keep it so the next generation can keep it, and so on, and pass it down. And you can follow this if you start reading in Genesis. Actually, it begins in Genesis 9, but you can start following how it drifted away and set up alternatives to what God had said. Now, let's look at this a bit. The crystal habit and structure have to do with electron behavior. So let's look at this. Many of you grew up with this illustration of the electron. It has a proton and neutron in the center. And then it has energy shells around it. So the first energy shell, we've been able to observe that it can hold 2 electrons maximum. And the difference between helium and hydrogen is that helium is filled in its first electron shell. Hydrogen has only 1 electron. So it's got a lot of room for a party. And this is what it does. It looks around. Hydrogen is found in over 2,500 minerals. And it's no wonder it allies very easily with a lot. Of course, hydrogen can also be temperamental. And you get it with the wrong element, now you don't have a party, you have a massacre is what you have. And but the arrangement of this was given to us by God. He made this atom, made it to function, and you've got over 100 now of atoms. Some of them have been manipulated by man to the point of getting out there a new element. Some of these, of course, are not very reliable. They disappear in a hurry. But the idea of manipulating where the electrons go and what they're doing, and we can do a lot. And of course, that brings up the question: what could natural forces do to the atom, and what could it do in the formation of minerals and crystals? Now, let's use an example here. If we take the element sodium. Any of you guys played with sodium when you were kids? Sodium is a very dangerous element. It's a very soft metal. And notice when you look at the electrons, it has a total of 11 electrons, but notice the third shell has 1 electron. So it's 7 short of being full. Now, what kind of trouble do you suppose sodium can get into if it's allied with the wrong elements? Well, we found this out as kids. We could go down to the drugstore. They didn't have the strict stuff on purchasing chemicals back in those days. So we'd go down to the druggist, and we were all very good friends. Of course, families knew each other. And he'd sell us the sodium. It's a real soft, silvery metal. And of course, you kids, you be careful of this stuff. This is dangerous. That was our warning label. And then he said, you got to handle it with rubber gloves, and don't let it touch your skin because your skin's got moisture on it. And so we would cut off with a pocket knife. We'd cut off little bits, and we'd go to the local pond and start throwing it in the water. Boom! You laugh, all kinds of things. I'm surprised I didn't do any damage to myself. I did the stuff in the house. I was studying. This is a little kid now. Mom was thrilled with it. Here, out of the 6 kids, I was the scientist's son. But and I was studying nitric acid. Now, nitric acid is really caustic stuff, and I put a rubber stopper in it. I knew that you weren't supposed to put metal on it because it would eat that metal away. Well, it would do the same to rubber, and so it would eat the rubber away and build up gases, and that would explode. And that went on the floor and just burned a big hole in the floor in the special stuff they had on the floor. Well, we had a lot of fun, but we certainly destroyed a lot of stuff. And that can show you what happens when corruption takes God's creation and does some nasty things with it. That happens. But let's say that this sodium has plenty of space for more electrons. So it's out there, let's have a party. How many electrons are you missing? Well, chlorine raises its hand, okay? And so in chlorine, notice that third energy level has 2, 4, 6, 7. So does it have room to join another party? Sure does. So what happens when you join these two? Now, these are very dangerous elements. Sodium is, you don't want to fiddle around with sodium. You're handling it with your hands. If you've got moisture on it, you're going to feel a few burn things. But chlorine gas is really deadly. But notice what happens when they get together in a good way. Well, when you combine these two, you get a wonderful crystal that's formed. Anybody guess what that is? That's exactly right. A halite crystal. And it's always cubic or square. It's really a beautiful crystal if you can get it this way. A lot of salt is massive when you find it. And interesting place. My wife is from Kansas, so we get back there. We were getting back there quite often when her folks were alive. But we'd visit in Hutchinson, we'd visit the salt mine there. And you go down 600 feet in an elevator, and here's this huge salt mine. It's been at it since the early 1900s. And Hutchinson's about, 200,000 people. But this salt mine down there, 600 feet below the ground, it covers the entire area of Hutchinson down below. And of course, it's kept up with pillars, so they know how much to take out and how much to leave there. And it's an excellent preservation mineral. There are piles of things like banana peels and partially eaten sandwiches, and they never picked them up. They left them there, just kind of an interesting object lesson from way, way, way back. They just left them in piles. And they're preserved. They don't rot. And come to find out, this is where a lot of movie companies and the government even would store valuable documents. The whole wardrobe of Wizard of Oz is preserved down in this salt mine. It's just standard. You can look at it, no changes to it. So it's one of these minerals that I am guessing was created by God and then deposited in fluids, hot fluids. Now they're finding all kinds of biological life in halite. And there's a big study going on with that. Well, this mine is, of course, probably sedimentary in nature. It was probably laid down by an awful lot of water at some point. That is probably closer to the flood. But I think it's interesting. Here's a parallel where perhaps it originated during the creation and then, of course, had lots and lots of stuff done to it during the flood. Now, we just have to find out why would that be. Now, if you take sodium and you add water to it, so there's 3 elements involved there, this is what happens. You get a lot of trouble. And you get fire, and you get hydrogen gas is released, and I mean, it is something to see. This is great. You can see why we as kids love to play with it. But it can cause a lot of problems and damage. Today, when I order it for classes and things, I can only get little bits, and the most I can get is about the size of my little fingernail. And it's very closely monitored by the FBI. I have to fill out a form every time I order it, because they want to track it. So who knows what file looks like with me. But you can't just go out anymore and get it in jars of oil anymore. You can't do that like we used to do as kids. So the atom, it really is like the family. And from the family and the atom both, we can see that there's design and purpose. Now, design and purpose, when you're talking to an evolutionist, design and purpose by itself are anathema. They cannot stand the thought of design and purpose independent of evolution. So if you want to talk about the wonders of evolution, then you can talk about design and purpose. But outside of that context, oh, no, we don't bring God into the picture here. That gives a lot of them heart trouble. You don't do that. But we can see a lot of things in nature that have a lot of design and purpose. We've already seen one of the purposes in putting two elements together gives us some very valuable things. The word salt comes from a Roman Latin word meaning salary. That's the word we get salary from. When you work for a living, you take that paycheck. Romans, in many cases, would rather have been paid in salt. It was a very valuable commodity, and they were paid in salt. So we get our word salary from that. Very valuable. Now, the atom also exhibits, just as the family does today, it exhibits corruption, and of course, as the rest of nature also exhibits corruption. There are some things that we see if we look closely and we're open to our Creator. We can see a lot of things that are valuable in nature, and the family's a wonderful unit. But of course, it is also corrupted by sin, came into the world. And a lot of nature, same way, has been corrupted. And so it's a big project for us to sort through all of that. And that's the fun and joy in doing science. You can see a lot of this stuff. So God created the atom, and man has figured out how to manipulate it through especially bonding of elements and breaking connections. And each one of those consume energy, and they put out something else. And you can get some really horrendous things, or you can get some great things that have been produced. But it's man who manipulates these things. And also in nature, with corruption, you can break and bond elements in nature. So God created the atom. He did it by design and purpose. And normally, chemistry follows rules. That's why it's really fun to do chemistry, because everything, if you do it just right, everything works, and it does what it's supposed to do if you follow the rules. But when you don't know what you're doing, I didn't as a kid. I was out doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, the neighbor kids and I had this, we were making gunpowder fuses and all kinds of stuff when we were kids. And no one seen about it. Boys will be boys. That's what we learned when you're growing up. But we have to ask the question, what happened to the norm? Everything used to follow rules perfectly. Very first rule, God said, the tree that's in the center of the garden, you shall not eat. For the day that you eat it, you shall surely die. There's rules and consequences. And we have to learn that that's part of the natural way of life. It's part and parcel of getting a family to work. You have to follow the rules. But when we don't, of course, corruption takes place. And this is what happened with sin. So what do gems and crystals have to do with the Genesis flood? If we apply some of these things, we see that on the first day of creation, God created light. Now, this is not this kind of light where he turned on some light bulbs. That's one type of light. But you see that in fact, when you look at the pictures here, you see the atom. Now, in an electron microscope, you can begin to see how the different particles, how the electrons line up together to give you a crystal shape. And of course, that's why you see it as the shape right, the end picture here. It's not always clear in minerals that have a massive shape. You don't see any shape, you just see a chunk of it. So we call this light spectrum, and it's energy. It's all energy, and that's what gives the whole universe, what put it in motion was with light. And despite what the scientists say, there was hydrogen, oxygen, quartz, potassium feldspar, and a whole host of others that were created on the very first day of creation. Not 13 billion years ago, starting out with hydrogen being the simplest element, they say, and then helium, lithium, and so on, right across the periodic table. No, they were all created, except for the ones that man has produced. They're not very reliable, but he has managed to manipulate the atom in order to get some changes. But the electromagnetic spectrum, this is a wonderful tool, only a part of it is visible. All the rest of it is invisible. So your microwave, your lots of other things that generate electricity, and you can see that the wavelengths of these different products can vary from harmless to real harmful, and can do a lot of damage. This is why when you go to the dentist, he throws that lead vest over you. Doesn't want the X-rays, that's another form of the light spectrum, to penetrate and start fooling around with your insides. The flood, we're very much aware by reading the account in Genesis that the flood brought about rapid change. We're looking at how long. How long did the flood last? Some would say 40 days and 40 nights. Nope. Any other guesses? I'll just put that one aside now. Nope. About a year. And so it was a very rapid and destructive process that took place in God's creation. Now, this got me to thinking, years and years ago, I was fascinated, still am. It's, I think, my favorite hobby within geology is fluorescence. Fluorescence is part of the light spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum. Fluorescent has to do with electron movement activated by short and long wave energy that causes fluorescent. And it causes it in about 12% of the minerals. Whoa, wait a minute. Why only 12%? In other words, it's a guess. You can't just go out and go to a pile of rocks and say, yeah, it's all fluorescent. No, you take your fluorescent light out there and you do some walking around at night and see which ones react to the fluorescent light. But only about 12%. So here we're looking at zinc ore and then calcite. Not all calcite fluoresces, and not all zinc ore fluoresces. So it's really a phenomenon that's a mystery. A geologist understands how it works, but they don't understand why we only have 12% of the minerals that fluoresce. This is a wonderful study now. We're going to get into the Genesis flood here in a little bit, and we're going to see how Genesis flood offers really the only real explanation of why we have fluorescence. Now, we also have fluorescence in dinosaur bones. They are green. Do you ever wonder why dinosaur bones have green? They turn green under fluorescent light. Well, we find a lot of them in the Colorado Plateau and in the same similar formation up in Montana and up into Canada. It's called the Colorado Plateau. It's 130,000 square miles of sedimentary rock, primarily sandstone, and it contains uranium. In fact, a lot of the uranium for the U.S. Supply comes from the Colorado Plateau. And it was discovered quite by accident in dinosaur bones. As some geologists, they're of course looking around for bones they can put together and get these big beasts. But as they began to get curious, they shined some fluorescent light on them and they all started glowing green. And sure enough, uranium gives off a green color. Incidentally, many of the thunder eggs back here and the ones I've got at home, I've always tested them. I polished now somewhere around 2,000 of them. And I can tell with the fluorescent light, I can see which ones are fluorescent. Not all of them are, but they all fluoresce green. Now, what do you suppose, what metallic ore do we find in those thunder eggs? Uranium. Now, the uranium in the Colorado Plateau, in fossils, and in thunder eggs has one thing in common. They were both affected by the results of the Genesis flood. Colorado Plateau, you ever wonder why you got these two formations? Anybody know what the names of these two formations are? They're called the mittens, the two mittens. You see how they're, that's what they're called. Those are the remnants of the sandstone that originally covered this whole area, 130,000 square miles. You take at least what we can observe anyway, you take a line and draw it across the top, and you can see just how thick this sandstone covered things. So it was laid down by the flood, and with it, a lot of bones. You can't get this kind of formation from a few rainstorms and local flooding. It just doesn't happen. So the chemical arrangements can be bonded, broken, and mixed. And you can experiment with this. You can produce it with heat. That'll do the trick. Liquids. You can do it with other chemicals, with pressure. And if any of you have ever used the, what are those, instant pots? Have you ever used those? Oh, I feel like a master now because I can cook. I never used to be able to do it. My wife was the wonderful cook. Never came out like hers. But I'll tell you, the Instant Pot kind of comes in a close second. And what is the Instant Pot using? Heat and pressure, and does it in a short period of time. And the right chemical environment. Now, what is the common element among all of these forces and the flood? Well, the flood is all of these factors would have been present in the flood. Well, how do you know? You weren't there. No, but Noah was, and he starts off recording it in Genesis 7:11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day, all of the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were open. Now, this is a lot of earth and rock moving around. Rock, I believe, was a big part of the foundation of the earth early on, and probably formed what we call plutonic rocks. I'll show you what those look like. But as you begin to rub things together, they produce friction, and friction generates heat. Now, what happens when you've got huge megaliths moving around and rubbing against each other? You're generating a lot of heat. How could the Genesis flood have geologically affected the world that God had created? Now, this is the whole in our geology instruction when we're teaching our kids and grandkids. Teaching them to think about what it is they're reading. Let's think about this. What is the implication in that one verse? That's a lot of geology. I can remember I'd taken secular geology. I was trained in it. But when I became a Christian and began to read the Bible for the first time in my life, and I got to this verse, and I just, whoa, that's geology. Even though it doesn't use the word, and it doesn't list the rocks, not directly, but indirectly, we know the earth is made up of rock. And, but what would have happened, given this is be a historical event, what would have happened to the earth's chemical processes? Well, a lot of change would have come about. Now, we didn't see it, so we have to use this kind of as our framework. But you notice I didn't go outside of that framework. That holds me to the faithfulness to the scriptures. It would have broken the crust of the earth and gave us volcanoes. Have you ever thought about that? A lot of times I'll ask kids, first question we've studied is, what do you think? Did God create volcanoes? Oh, yeah, Mr. Nurre, they did. I said, where did you learn that? Well, my mom and dad told me. And I said, okay, let's just think about that for a minute. What comes out of a volcano? Oh, lots and lots of lava, hot lava, yeah? Hawaii lava comes out at about 1900 degrees. Now that's anything that is carbon-based is going to instantly flash into fire. It's just going to ruin it. It has, in Mount St. Helens, you can go to take the trail of the two forests. at Mount St. Helens. And they've got it elevated, so you're walking through the recent forest that was, it's covered by lava. It's got stuff growing up now. But down underneath, you can see these long shafts where trees, older trees, used to grow. And now they're shafts where you can see what used to be there, patterns of wood, bark, limbs, things like that. And boy, it did it in a hurry. And now you try to put that with a creation, a special creation, it just doesn't fit. Volcanoes would have been destroying God's creation. Another thing you get, first day of the flood, was the release of noxious gases and acids. Now these acids will kill you fast. Volcanoes put out an awful lot of carbon dioxide. This is why the Canadians really hate us. This is why. Because Mount Baker, up north here, the wind direction would take that ash and the gases right into Canada. And just as Mount St. Helens erupted, the wind patterns took it straight east, covered Yakima. At noon, all the lights in the city came on. It was so dark from the ash. And so it's bad stuff. And the gases, my goodness. In Yellowstone, you've been to Yellowstone, have you? You're walking through remnants of a big caldera eruption. And because of that, there was all kinds of evidence of it. And the hot springs and the geysers give off a hydrogen sulfide gas in some ways. There's other features that don't have that. But the park warns you, if you feel lightheaded, get out of the area immediately, because it'll kill you. And carbon dioxide is rampant. Now, imagine that on the first day of creation. You talk about havoc in God's creation. So really, I think the Genesis flood really does explain volcanoes. The only way secularists can explain it is that the lavas were a part of the early Earth, so that 4.6 billion years ago it was nothing but a mass of lava and hot gases and so on. And then eventually it cooled after a few billion years and life started to come out of that. I don't think so. Life would have been destroyed by what a volcano does. It's our biggest culprit when it comes to global warming. Volcanoes, the big enemy. And mixed elements, and of course, the flood would have spread out minerals. Again, you look at these thunder eggs, they're not being formed today. No geologist has ever seen a thunder egg form. They're a thing of the past. And my suspicion is that they're really a result of the early results and consequences of the flood, where the minerals were much more abundant and evenly spread and used. Remember, the earth was a beautiful place when it was created, and it turned ugly as the flood destroyed it 1,600 years later. So heat generated by friction, lots of it. Hot liquids generated from friction and magma. Pressure generated by breaking. And mixing of chemicals. Doesn't take much to get something real nasty. Acids generated from decay of animals. One of the things they're suspecting more and more is that the caves in their origin. You probably noticed that the formations in caves are much bigger than ones that are forming today. That's because today they're typically just calcium carbonate or calcite. The big formations were a result of some catastrophic event. And if you go to the Lewis and Clark Caverns, not too far from here in Montana, they're in limestone mountains, and you find fossil marine life all over the place, wherever a cave has been. And so the death of a lot of animals would have generated a lot of different kinds of acids. And of course, that would do a number on the chemistry involved here. And then radioactivity generated from below. Radioactivity is an interesting thing. Much of it is very dangerous. And if God had created it as a thing laying around on the ground, during Creation Week, I'm not sure we'd look the same today as we did back then. It would have begun to really affect us and affect our structure. I really think radioactivity was released as part of the destruction of the flood on that first day of the flood. And radioactivity is part and parcel. It's involved with fluorescence. And fluorescence would probably be related to the same thing. Now, we do observe today metamorphosis in rocks and cooking. The word metamorphic means to change form. Geologists have a special rock type they call metamorphic rocks. These are rocks, they'll explain, took billions of years to form. The word means to change form. And I do this little project with my kids when I teach them about metamorphosis. In cooking and baking, you have chemical alteration. It's what you do when you fry eggs. You're metamorphosing those eggs. They'll never be the same. You've changed its chemistry. Still good for you, still contains the proteins and vitamins and so on, but it'll never be the same. So I'll take them in a pan of brownies. They're cooked just to the T. And then I'll put them back in the oven for a couple of hours. And of course, they look like charcoal. That's metamorphosis. And you've caused it by heat. And it can change things and harden them. Well, what about metamorphic rocks? Secular geologists tell us that these formed over millions of years by way of heat and pressure. They acknowledge heat and pressure, but they put the time limit on it. Over millions of years, buried deep underground. This is the primary conflict between the secular view of metamorphic rocks and a creationist view of metamorphic rocks. They say it took hundreds of millions of years. That's because they discount the flood. But the flood is history, and so it was a rapid geological process. So if you look at this metamorphic rock called gneiss, it's characterized by alternating bands of light and dark minerals. And you have the metamorphic rock of schist. And then you have slate. Now, in metamorphic rocks, they exhibit changes in crystalline arrangement. So for instance, here's a plutonic rock. It's called granite. You can see the minerals are arranged very evenly in the rock. Well, if you take a look at gneiss, it contains the same minerals as granite, but the minerals have been reoriented, have been rearranged. And I suspect that what we're looking at is granite that's been metamorphosed. So the original rock of the earth was most likely granite. Geologists call it the foundation rock of the earth, of our planet. It's granite. And now you can, of course, have different colors of granite because you've got different minerals, but basically mica, feldspar, and quartz, and they're evenly mixed, and they formed the foundation. And then through the flood, most likely was metamorphosed by all the heat that was being released and the shifting chemical changes that were going on, and produced gneiss. Here's another one that exhibits mixing of minerals. If you take the biotite mica and clay, you can get a rock called schist. Kids, you have to be very careful of that word now, okay? Yeah, schist is made up of this, and it's in layers. And now something else it looks like raisins in its foundation. Those are garnets. And in the mix, of course, they probably somewhere picked up garnets. Not all metamorphic rocks contain garnets, which is an interesting phenomenon. But it's real easy to see how the chemistry involved in the flood probably changed things. You can have changes in molecular structure from heat. Here's some rocks. We call them shale. They're very brittle. They can break real easily. You can break them in your hands. But then when you heat them, like we did those brownies, we get slate. Slate is very hard. Still the same clay minerals, but they've been metamorphosed in the process. Another example of changes in molecular structure is the mineral quartz. And of course, you have a metamorphic rock called quartzite or quartz stone. And, well, it's really easy to see here. Perhaps heat and pressure would have caused quartz to recrystallize and come out as something else. Not millions of years, but through that 1 year process. So that is quartzite. Now if you take quartzite, you break it up and you tumble it, guess what you have? You've got a valuable gemstone called, escape my, aventurine. There we go. Aventurine. This stuff sells for big bucks. So I have lots of this. I've got lots of this laying around. So I break it up occasionally and tumble it so I can get this. Isn't that pretty stuff? Tumbled, polished. So again, another example of changes molecular structure. If you take limestone and you fiddle around with its chemistry, heat, pressure, you're going to get marble. There's a good way to find out about this. You drop a little bit of acid on limestone, a little bit of acid on marble, and they both do the same thing. They fizz. That gives us, that shows us that it contains calcium carbonate. So that's marble. In caves, these are sedimentary formations. They're made of calcium carbonate that's been transformed to aragonite, which is another form of calcium carbonate. Here's an interesting thing, though. A lot of caves, in fact, most of them, will fluoresce. Isn't that pretty? Yeah, just shining a fluorescent light on them. And this probably deals with the altered calcium in calcium carbonate. Calcium, of course, is a metal. You've probably seen this. These caves, look at how big this guy is, just a real small, dinky human being. Look at the size of these crystals. And these are in Mexico. You know, we find in this, you can't stay down there more than about a half hour or so because the temperature is, I mean, it's 150 degrees, something like that. It's very humid, full of calcium sulfate, and near a volcanic field. So you're beginning to get the idea here that we're dealing with some chemistry. Scientists say that these have formed over hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of years. Of course, we can't accept that because our framework only allows about 6,000 years. So we have to see it all come together there. Scientists have miscalculated, and they've really stupendously miscalculated. So calcium sulfate. The Bible just, it doesn't give us that much time, so we have to work within that. Work within that framework. Now, people object and they say, well, wait a minute, but geology is a science. Well, not all of it. I learned early on in my studies that about 80% of modern geology is nothing more than interpretation. It's given scientific verbiage, but only about 20% of it is actual science. The rest of it is interpreting. And modern geology then is built through following a man-constructed framework called the geological timetable. It is a worldview, and it involves worldview plus interpretation of fossils. We see fossils as evidence of what God created that were destroyed in the flood. That's how we would frame that. They don't. They see fossils as evidence of early life, some of which has gone extinct. But those are choices about a worldview. They're not demonstrated by science. So they call it science, but it really is not. Science requires observation and repetition. Those of you who are scientists, you know one of the hallmarks of genuine science is its ability to be repeated. Repeatability is a hallmark. If you can't repeat what you just did, then you better hold the phone and not publish it because it may not be science. It may be a fluke of some kind. Repetition is what makes it science. Well, wait, objection. The Genesis flood is not science either. You got it there. It isn't. It's history. It's built on records and eyewitness accounts. So we're dealing with two different ball games here. Let's get it right. Science deals with things that you can observe, test, and repeat. and it's generally in the present. History deals with unique one-time events that are recorded by observation, and they were written about. The origin of fossils and landforms are interpreted based on a historical framework, not a man-made framework, but a historical framework. That's important. That you teach your kids the Bible is genuine history. Now, it doesn't have everything you'd like to know, but it is genuine history. Jesus regarded it as history. Do you not know that when God created man, he created them male and female? That's spoken of as a historical event, which has a principle to it. So modern geology is evolutionary worldview and the interpretation of fossils. And it's set in opposition to the biblical historical record and the interpretation of fossils. Big difference, isn't it? So both of them are on the same plane. Our biblical framework has a period of creation, has a period of pre-flood, or when things were corrupted, has a period of flood when God destroyed the earth, and the post-flood, immediately after the flood. And it also contains the period of the Messiah, promised Messiah, and salvation. It also has another element of geology to it, which is new heavens and a new earth. That's every bit as geology. Study of geology means the study of the earth. Well, I want to know what's going to happen to the earth in the future. Well, guess what? Guess what? God laid it out for us. And you don't need to read very much of the book of Revelation to figure out, yeah, there's an end coming. And this is our final warning, to get on the train or get left behind. In the Jesus movement days, we used to say, turn or burn. We modified a little bit since then, but same idea. Catch the train or get left in the depot. It's really the idea. And in other words, there was no prehistoric past. Now, completing things here, I've done a lot of things to record what we can observe. These crystals are amazing. They're about 6 inches long, and they're produced from chemicals and hot water. The diamond, you know what we can do with a diamond? They teach that diamonds were the first substances made on Earth. So that's every time you listen for this and you get closer to Christmas now, you know, they're 1 billion years old, they call them, 1 billion years old. Well, guess what? We can now produce authentic diamonds in 1 week from carbon and pressure. Here's a set of crystals that I produced overnight, chemicals and hot water. And another ones I produced here had to do with chemicals, and I got aragonite. Remember the calcium carbonate, beautiful little florets within hours. So it can be done. It doesn't take time. The issue is it's a matter of chemistry, not of time. Time really has nothing to do with it. It really is dependent more on the chemical environment. Modern Earth history is built upon rejection of the Bible and doctrines of speculation and interpretation. By the way, if you don't think this is right, try taking a course and disagreeing with the teacher. They'll say, well, sure, you're not going to, no matter what you do, you're not going to get an A in this course. I can tell you that. I don't care who you are. Those are doctrines. If you fail to believe those, you're in trouble. Biblical Earth history is built upon a framework of history in actual records that reveal events we cannot test through observation. So if you take a landform like this one in New Mexico, the laboratory is not the same thing as studying landforms. Studying Earth history requires interpretation by way of the right framework. You can't look at this picture without a framework, and you choose the framework, either small and slow and long ago or big and fast in the recent past. It's your choice, but you're going to get different answers in either case. Secularists have their own framework, uniformitarianism. It's a belief about the past. Secularists attempt to interpret everything by it. This is the first doctrine you learn on the first day of college geology. You'll learn the doctrine and the heroes and the high priests that gave us those doctrines. Revelation from those that have gone before us. And you must believe those if you're going to pass geology. The origin and geological past history of the earth is outside the realm of science. Secularists teach trust in a philosophical framework. So the origin of agates, crystals, and gems, also outside the realm of science. It requires trust in a historical framework and the scriptures. Now we can start discovering things about the earth, and that's where you discover, chemistry, pretty practical explanations. Believers have their own framework too, the historical scriptures, and they should seek to interpret everything by them. This is the thing where I think we are falling apart in our instruction to our kids. We've got to teach them. Now you're going to have to learn it with them. That's why we have the Geology Learning Center, by the way. It is there to equip kids and families. And if we can teach families how to interpret things, how to think about them, how to take the concepts in Scripture and put them as a template over everything you're looking at, you can compete with some of these people. You can get a chance then to influence them. Okay? But this is the challenge that we have to do. Okay, I think I'm done here.
You want to wrap up by a little overview of your table?
I'm sorry?
Can you give a little overview of what's on your table?
Yeah, overview. I've got short explanations of gems and crystals all the way around the table. And these are ones that I've collected over the years. So do them just like this. This is what I wanted to do. And then on the other side of the table is a lot of the literature that I've written through the years. And so take a look at those and see if there's ways that we can help you.
Hey, you've got some of your books there too, I think.
Yeah, books are over there. Yeah, a lot of my books.
Okay, well, let's give him a hand for his presentation. And so you'll be available at the table.
Yeah,
if
I sure
people
will.
Have questions, you can.
Yeah, sure can.
Yeah. So let me just wrap up with a few announcements. I hope you got a lot of new information out of that. I know I learned some new stuff from that. Just a few words about the Apologetics Forum table. You know, last November we had Bruce Malone here, and he left us a number of good books. Some of them you probably haven't seen before. This is particular for homeschoolers and people that want to have their children understand evolution versus creation. This is a book called The Christian's Guide to Refuting Evolution. So if you have children in that frame of mind, you might want to look at that. He's got two other books. One is Search for the Truth, and the other one that some of you know of because you bought them before Christmas last year, and that is his devotional books, an example of design for every day of the year, 365 days of the year. So we still have some of the books left there. Look at our table there. And then a special book. Some of you may remember Larry Vardaman. Well, Larry Vardaman was the vice president of ICR, and he is now retired. And but he never stops. He's still writing, but he's writing books that are, you know, sort of meant for children and also their parents. But here's one on the glacier, just talking about the glaciers. And Larry and his wife, we visited them a number of times. They now live in Idaho, and they gave me a bunch of free books. So we're going to pass them on as free books. I think we got about 5 books left on the table there. So if you have an interest, just talk to one of the gals there. So wrapping up, next month, of course, it's starting pretty soon, we have Shahram Shadian coming back here. Shahram is originally from Iran. He immigrated to the U.S. with his family when he was a young boy. And his family, of course, was Muslim. And he converted to Christianity through the witness of a very strong Iranian pastor. And so now he himself is a pastor. He used to live here. He's given talks in this church a number of times. And so we have him coming back on the 27th of February. That's the Friday the 27th. And he's going to speak on the differences between Christianity and Islam. How do those two belief systems differ? And you can get a flyer, or of course go to our website. You can download this information as well. And we have some other flyers in the back of upcoming events and other speakers, so take advantage of that. So if you're not on our mailing list yet and you want to be, there's a sign-up sheet on the back. Just put your name and email address, and we'll get you on the list. Remember, this ministry is supports through donations, either online, or we have 2 boxes in the back there. As you exit, if you care to contribute to that, just pop something in the boxes there. We have some refreshments there that you can share as you peruse the tables as well. Some other special sales. We have a number of DVDs left on our tables, the Apologetics Forum, where we are going to be over time divesting ourselves of those, because many people have some other ways of looking at these, live streaming, etc. So there are DVDs back there. If you buy one, you get the second DVD free. Now, of course, the one you have to buy is the one a little bit more expensive than the other ones. You can't pick up a $4 DVD and get a $15 DVD free. So appreciate that. And so, yes, and the Malone books, so lots to look at. So we look forward to having Sharam here next month. And all the information, remember, is on our website, apologeticsforum.org. You can find everything there. So let me just close in a word of prayer, and we'll be dismissed. Father, we come to you just to thank you again for this time. We thank you for Patrick and Vicky's ministry. We just pray that you would use them mightily to reach the many homeschool children that he teaches online and in person, and also for the tours, the creation tours of Yellowstone and other places that he leads to show your creation to them, so that help us understand what you did for us. And we thank you for the evidence you have left us of the truth of your word, and you've seen some of this in Patrick's talk here, but there are many more pieces of evidence as well, and we thank you for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.